Great. Hi, everyone. I can see people are starting to join us already, which is fantastic. So we'll just get going in a few minutes. I think we'll give it a little bit of time for people to join. But I will say a quick hello and a very warm welcome. It's really great to have you guys with us today. It's a real pleasure, and thanks for giving up your lunchtime to be able to join us. My name is Aaron. I'll be co-hosting the webinar with Hannah on behalf of WonderWorks. And like I said, yeah, we'll be starting in just a minute or so. But in the meantime, if you'd like to use the chat box, that'll be on throughout the webinar. So do feel free to put any questions or comments in there that come up, and we can discuss. But in the meantime, yeah, it'd be really great if you feel like it, just to say hello and where you're tuning in from today. And then also if you've got any questions as well. But yeah, just feel free to pop your name in the chat box and maybe where you're joining us from, or what company or brand you work for. We'd love to hear from you. So hi, Tim, great to see you. Can see a few familiar names as well. Great, yeah, lovely. Hi, Emil, welcome. And Peter, Klaus. Great, yeah. Really lovely to have you with us today. Hi, Andrew. Hi, Lonnie. Great to see you. Cool. Yeah, I'll just give it a couple more minutes before we get started. Hi, Fleur. Nice to have you join us today. Great.
Sarah from New York, very glam.
Yeah. Amsterdam as well. Hello, Olivia. Nice to have you with us. Great. Wonderful. Cool. So yeah, I think we'll make a bit of a start, and I've still seen more people joining. We've got about 56 so far, but yeah, feel free to come on in, and a very warm welcome. It's great to have you with us today. So yeah, I think let's make a start. So as I said, for those of you just joining, my name is Aaron, and I'll be co-hosting with Hannah today on behalf of WonderWorks. For those of you who might not have heard of us, we are a creative agency specializing in the drinks industry. And every quarter or so we host an event or a webinar called WonderNETwork, which is what this is. So the WonderNETwork it's a real community of drinks professionals. So we get together each quarter to network, learn from one another, and also to capture insights and outlooks on the current drinks industry. So each time we're exploring a trend that really impacts us and our industry and our colleagues, and also shapes consumer buying behavior. So today, that topic, as you can tell from my background, is brands with purpose. And we'll be discussing what that looks like, and also really what it takes to be an authentic purpose-led brand. So for us, as a creative agency specializing within the drinks industry, we've met some incredibly successful brands. We've really had the pleasure of working with them, both with and without brand purpose. So brands with purpose, for us, it's an incredibly important and influential topic. We use it to help support our clients, and also to help them cut through the noise in what can sometimes be a diluted market. And also for others in the drinks industry, I think it's an important topic for those striving to do good and give back. But I suppose the question, and one of the things we'll look at today, is what is it? So for us, the term brand purpose is really the reason for a brand to exist, other than for financial profit. It's the why to your brand, and it's at the heart of what your brand does, often providing the foundation on which to build everything else. So whether that's striving to do things better through positive, sustainable, and social practices for your team, the planet, and the people within it, it can take quite a few different forms. But, and here's a big question, which we'll also be looking at, is, does purpose actually sell? I think today, in addition to looking at examples of brands who are getting it very right, and then perhaps others who need to have a bit of a rethink, we'll also be looking at the impact purpose has on the consumer and the bottom line as well, and exploring whether all brands actually need one. So we have an excellent panel of speakers today, and I'm really excited to be here with them, and from both brands large and small, as well as our fantastic host, Hannah, who I'll be handing over to shortly. But first, I just wanted to say a bit about Hannah. So Hannah Rhodes is the founder and MD of Hybrid Beers, the honey beer, and she's also one of Sunday Times 35 under 35 people to watch. She's got a proven track record of developing and building craft drinks brands in the UK on trade, starting with her time at Meantime Brewery, where she launched one of Meantime's most successful lines, London Lager. And Hannah's passion for craft beer and urban beekeeping is really what led her to found Hybrid Beers in 2013. So with bees at the heart of the business, Hannah is really on a mission, and succeeding, I'll add, to create the most natural brew out there while supporting independent British beekeepers and also protecting our planet's pollinators. So Hybrid's been awarded numerous medals, both internationally across quality and sustainability, which is really why we're delighted to have Hannah here hosting and leading the topic on brands with purpose. So I think without further ado, Hannah, I will hand over to you. And yeah, welcome everyone.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. That was a lovely introduction. And I'm genuinely delighted to be hosting this talk today. A big warm welcome from me, both to the panelists and our audience. And I do think we have a very exciting hour ahead of us. So as Aaron mentioned, today we're going to be discussing with people who've lived and breathed the experience, the question of, does purpose sell? So while I'm going to try and tease out margins and rate of sales stats, our panelists are going to be very brave and share some examples that we hope will enable you to perhaps make your own path towards being a viable brand with purpose, should you wish. So I think that reminder of, why is purpose still a hot topic and why are we talking about it today? I did want to just share a few stats with you. So if you consider that 83% of consumers said that companies should only earn a profit if they deliver positive impact, or that 90% of consumers agree that if a brand or company truly lives by a clear and strong brand purpose, they would be likely to support them even if that company or brand had a misstep or received public criticism for something that they did. That 72% of Gen Zs and millennials prefer to buy brands that do good in comparison to just 49% of boomers, and that a recent study by NYU Stern found that products marketed as sustainable grew over 5 times faster than brands that were not. So with those kind of stats out there, I guess it's really no wonder that many businesses feel that they have to make this transition, not just that they'd like to. So what are the experiences from our people in our own industry do they think that purpose sells? So without further ado, let's introduce our panel of fantastic speakers. So today I'm joined by Marika von Santvoort, founder of Pachadi Cacao, 100% natural cacao juice. By Nick Gillett, managing director of premium spirits importer Mangrove Global. Callum Fraser, brand ambassador at Discarded Spirits, which is an exciting offshoot of William Grant and Sons. And last but definitely not least, Jeannie Cronk, co-founder of Maison Mirabeau, the award-winning French rosé vineyard and brand. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Thanks for the invitation.
So Nick, we're going to jump in at the deep end and chat a little bit about viability. Being a distributor, you must be commercially focused, I'm sure. So what do you think? Should everybody be jumping on the purpose bandwagon?
Well, hello everybody. First of all, listen, I make a living out of distributing brands that ultimately consumers want to consume. I think when we talk about brands with purpose, I think it's great. I've got several brands in my portfolio that have a clear set out purpose. I think the market's quite crowded at the moment. And I think it's also important to make sure that brands that may well have a purpose also make a profit. So they're there to still do whatever they're planning on doing in 10 years' time. And those two things shouldn't be exclusive. The sustainability, we'll talk about sustainability and carbon footprints, which is obviously the hot topic at the moment. They are words that are bandied around and interpreted in a myriad of different ways, and lots of big companies are jumping on the bandwagon. And I think those consumer stats are slightly misleading, because I think if you say to people, when everything else is being equal, would you buy a brand with purpose? The answer is absolutely. But often the brands, because they may be smaller, they don't have the efficiencies, or because they're more expensive to produce because they're using more expensive processes or looking after the environment or whatever else, there'd be a price differential. And so consumers say, well, yeah, it's a purpose, it's not one I align with. But I think for everybody going forward, your brands, do they have to have a purpose? I think, yes, they're going to have a very clear identity. They're going to clearly know what they're doing. Can brands backfill and adopt a purpose, which you do see some doing, and elements of greenwashing? I'm not so sure. So
interesting, because we've got a little bit of a mix of that today, I think.
If I champion two of the businesses I work with, I have Avalon Calvados. I know Tim and Steph are both on this call, so I will be nice to them. But they clearly set out, when they set out to create a drinks brand, they set out to create a drinks brand that was going to be the most planet positive brand they could do. So everything is at the heart of that. If they'd come to somebody like me, and in doing that, they use Calvados, because for every bottle of Calvados that's grown, they're saving 2.7 kilograms before they start replanting everything of CO2. If they'd come to me, I would have gone, that's a great idea, that's lovely, that's perfect, we're helping the planet. You do know that Calvados doesn't sell huge amounts around the world in a category that's declining. But they didn't come to me, they went on and did it. They've been very successful in doing it. We now have somebody who's looked at this, the problems with waste in glass and CO2, which is Eco Spirits, and they've come up with a packaging solution to close the loop, which is retrofitting and addressing a problem that's in there. If you combine Avalon and them together, you're saving 20 kilos of CO2 per eco tote. So, you've got one it's at their core of their DNA, and you've got another brand that's addressed a problem with a purpose.
You find, so purpose for you is a differentiator in your portfolio of drinks as well?
I would love all of my brands to have a very clear, positive planet purpose, in terms of what they do. I've had fair trade brands for 10, 15 years. That's difficult. They grow every year, and they're selling more than they've ever sold, but consumers don't really understand a lot of the concepts around that. And it's not consumers you have to convince, it's gatekeepers. I don't know, we'll probably talk about that later on. So those buyers, those rangers, those people who want to put it in the supermarket, those people who want to put it on a cocktail menu in a bar, in terms of drinks brands, they're the ones actually you really need to convince, and they're quite often driven by different metrics.
Okay, so Callum, for you, have there been any times where promoting a purpose-led brand hasn't worked commercially?
Thanks very much for having me, first and foremost. I think for any new business or brand, there's extensive initial investment. Commercially, I think there's probably a bigger sticking point actually at that gatekeeper point, rather than from a brand point of view. It's more at that point, bars, restaurants, bars, restaurants, supermarkets selling the product to the consumer. With sort of menu space and space on shelf being so confined and limited, it's really difficult to regale your story, to explain to a consumer why their drink in their glass might cost 50 pence more than something from another brand, or sort of why there's a price differential in a supermarket. So it's sort of our challenge is to find those drinkers are looking to make that positive swap. The positive change, so a really, really simple change, but educate educate not just them, but those bartenders, those gatekeepers. So when the right consumer does ask for something with a positive impact, that they're in the right place to find it, they're in the right place to be educated about it. Yeah, that's a sticking point, because as Nick pointed out, they are inherently almost driven by that metric. They need to see that percentage. All businesses do. Don't get me wrong. I've been that gatekeeper, but the ones that do want, those gatekeepers that do want to make a positive impact are on board with us. Yeah, that's great to be there, but the education piece needs to be there on top of it.
You have had some fantastic experiences with purpose-led NPD in the last couple of years, haven't you? Would you mind telling us a little bit about the USPs of those brands and the ingredients and what makes them a little bit different?
So our brands are at their very core made from 2 waste ingredients. They're all created using waste products from other food and drink elements. We started in 2018, and the first unique selling point and first unique thing about our brand was it wasn't something that came from our new product development team. It came from a brand ambassador, much the same way as myself. So we have a large parent company who do great things in terms of looking at sort of gaps in markets and where there are opportunities. But this came from somebody who noticed a change in how vermouth was being made and used within bars, but also sort of looked at waste materials. It started with somebody passing him a bag of something called cascara in a coffee roastery and saying, "You like playing with weird stuff, have a play with that." And it all sort of spiraled from there. And it's wonderful that brought together our waste from the coffee industry and waste from our internal sources in the whiskey industry. So we take sherry and we take cascara and we blend them together to make this wonderful vermouth, and that kind of set off this wonderful chain within our new product development team of just looking at other things, going, "Oh, what can we make? Sort of what other things are there to be played with?" So yeah, loads of exciting stuff. We now have a rum made from sort of pre-used rum in the whiskey industry, and add that to banana peels. We also have wine, a vodka made from waste from the wine industry, particularly Chardonnay. They're just wonderful products.
So something's obviously working if you've got a big parent company in the background that's backing it and actually rolling out some purpose-led NPD. Yeah,
absolutely. The new product development is going well. But yeah, no, I think it's more inspiration that they took from this initial product. And yeah, the parent company as a whole, they are absolutely key to driving our sustainability. The parent company as a whole want to become more sustainable. There's so much on their docket that they're working through, but we are their forefront to that, which is very exciting. So yeah, we're making a wider change, but it's being sort of led by ourselves.
Very exciting. So there's the purpose element is being used for inspiration internally within the wider business, but what about the banana peel rum? Because there's something exciting going on in that category generally, I think, isn't there?
Yeah, we play in a few categories. Obviously, with each of our different elements. We play in vermouth, play in vodka, play in rum, but we also have to play in sort of sustainability as a whole. When we came to market in 2018 with vermouth, the whole that whole element was primed for a shake-up. The whole category of vermouth was sort of primed for a shake-up. With rum, it's a little bit different. We are getting on board at a time where rum is growing, which is very, very exciting. But we are probably one of quite few brands in that sector going where you can do this, but you can do this in a really responsible way. Rum, unfortunately, historically has not been made in a responsible way in any way, shape, or form. But we are doing some really interesting things in a category that is growing. Not long after we sort of launched, there was just a flurry of ideas. So it's great to Great for that new product development team to sort of guide our hands. You know, the sad thing is there's so many waste elements out there in the food and drink industry that you know, we could make lots and lots of different you know, sort of creations, but yeah, new product development team are guiding us.
I think that's it, isn't it? Purpose can't exist alone. It has to be as part of, you know, maybe there's a category that's already in growth, and actually what you're doing is just really helping cut through some of the noise. It's I definitely found with Hiver, and I think early on I was very nervous to be only purpose-led. Now this is obviously 8 years ago, so things have definitely moved on, and our tone of voice has developed and changed in that time. We're much more confident to be cause-led in our comms than we were originally. And I think that's because it's a very different marketplace now, and consumers are driving some of that. But yeah, I thought there was something interesting about the banana rum in particular, because you've got really solid rate of sale, it's a category in growth, and as a result, you're just able to do more of the good stuff that you know, that you guys have been doing. So I thought that was exciting. Nick, could I ask you a little bit about what helps you pick a winner? Because if we're talking about, you know, I think with purpose-led brands, and, you know, my own definitely falls into this, it's quite easy to suddenly be niche and speciality, and that isn't necessarily in line with hitting great rate of sale targets and how you make that transition towards it. So yeah, what's the difference between niche and memorable to you, and how do you pick a winner for your portfolio?
I mean, we're in the world of spirits, and in that there are some pretty niche categories in terms of overall volume. But the same principles are sort of arrive for every category. So I think the first thing is we start with the liquid. So all of the other people on the call today, and a lot of the brands that have a purpose of being successful, is because actually the liquid just tastes great to start off with. And that's the fundamental starting point. I mean, if you have a very average product to start off with, regardless of your purpose, people might buy it once to help out, almost a charitable donation. But if it underwhelms completely, they're not buying again. So we look for that. There is a commercial reality to what we do, so that will depend on the brand and who they're looking to partner up with. So if you want to be in a supermarket, you're going to need budget to support price promotions. You're going to need activation, and you guys have already touched on it. You have to engage with consumers. There is a horrible fact about the on-trade in the UK, is that parts of the trade are still addicted to big listing fees and rebates. So if you really want to truly compete at that level, then you know you're going to need big budgets to do it. It's very difficult, regardless of how good you are, to cut through some of that, because these gatekeepers that we refer to, and the buyers are in there, they're hitting revenues for advertising, they're hitting revenues for rebates, and so on and so forth. And you know, they have to sacrifice something else apart from rotation. Don't get me wrong, brands have done it, and they've done it very, very well. And every now and then one explodes globally. It captures the hearts and the imagination of consumers straight away, and everybody then has to have it. I spend most of my time looking for those, obviously. For me, the other thing is the people behind the brands. They need to be passionate. There needs to be a reason for it, and the whole story needs to hold together. So if you are trying to be environmentally conscious and reduce plastic in use in your brands, for example, or reduce your CO2 footprint, that's great. They are two things that everybody should be trying to do. But if you're then polluting wastewater out the back of your distillery and pouring it into your local environment because you didn't do that, that's sort of, you then have to question whether the whole process is there. So we look at the people behind it. We want to work with nice people, ideally, but we also need a clear plan. I don't think it's right, and nobody here has created a brand, just dropped it on the market with no plan and no idea about what they want to do. But trying to help brands build those plans together are important.
Lovely.
The other thing that we look for is if we've got some USPs against its competitive set, and sometimes that is the purpose. And as we said, when all things are equal, if consumers are given a choice, they will quite often make the right one because it makes them feel good. And if you can drink cocktails whilst helping the planet, happy days. It's a very lazy way to hit your ESR. So there's quite a lot of
so purpose definitely can't come at the expense of taste or quality.
No,
it may well feed into the USPs that are the differentiator in the category.
Yeah.
But there's maybe
taste
a fine line
between
between USPs and being differentiated versus as perhaps niche. Well, Jeannie, I'm really excited to hear your story because I think it's a fantastic one and quite a personal one. So you started your vineyard on a beautiful nature reserve, and it was only more latterly that you made the decision to build purpose into the business. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, it's only more latterly that we even bought a vineyard. So we are actually, I've got to fly the flag a bit for a couple of near boomers who built a business from scratch, now 12 years ago. So in those days, the world of purpose was non-existent or just highly niche. So, I mean, we came to Provence, we moved to Provence, then to set up just a wine business. And our purpose was to make really awesome rosé and to talk to lots of people about it and to make people feel part of our journey. So we had obviously, I think a purpose in terms of, community spirit. We wanted to employ locally, work locally, and we'd have achieved all these things. But actually 3 years ago, we finally had earned enough money to buy our own wine farm here, which is when, our purpose became a lot more defined. So I think I want to just say, as somebody who's found a purpose more along the way, or a more defined purpose along the way, I think it's a nice thing that people are open to that, because it would be a great shame if we prohibited, all existing businesses from actually, changing their ways and or changing what they focus on or getting smarter along the way. So I want to fly the flag for that a little bit, because you're not either good or bad, and there's a lot of shades in between. And when we found this place here, we've realized that viticulture can really make a difference to climate change potentially. And my husband's founded a foundation to promote regen agriculture in vineyards, which is something that's now becoming increasingly common. But when we tried to do it, we found very little information on it, and we've since sort of dedicated a fair few hours of our time and money to actually educate other wine farmers about this. We're relatively at the beginning of our journey, but it's been a really great experience for us. And within the wider business, we're also undergoing B Corp certification at the moment. So we've wanted to actually, really research everything we do and try and basically constantly improve how we do things.
Amazing. What was the reason for you setting up that organization?
Well, it was really, like I said, we found it really hard to find information at the time about how to farm regeneratively in vineyards. There was a fair amount of info out there for general agriculture, but not much for viticulture. Yet viticulture is just one of those industries, a bit like, the spirits industry, people talk about it. So it sort of over indexes in terms of, conversation. So we thought it would be a really great thing to, to put together basically, content, ideas. Stephen's, my husband's sort of, got a whole host of people working with him now from all over the world in order to sort of bring together those ideas and help other people potentially farm in that way. And we're actually trying to get some local farmers, because in south of France, where they've invented wine farming more or less, it's quite difficult to pass on some of these ideas, but we're sort of, we're working on that too. So that's really become something we're really passionate about.
Oh, very good. I think we touched, so Nick was touching a little bit, I think, on, the need for budget and being, you still have to be serious if you want to be a contender and kind of especially with supermarket listings and some distributors, you need to have solid margin to be able to pay for some of this activity. But often I think purpose does cost a little bit more, whether that be through processes or supply chain. So I think we can perhaps move on from, that light touch on commercials towards cost. So what is it that's driving that extra cost, and who should cover it when it comes to being a brand with purpose? Callum, could you talk us through a little bit around your margins and the brands with purpose, the banana peel rum? Does it work for you guys from a cash margin perspective?
Yeah, so I can't say for certain. So I can't say for certain, like for like against other products within sort of our portfolio, but each separate brand will have its own sort of margin to hit. I can't imagine ours are lessened anyway, because we're a purpose-led brand. I believe we're treated the same way as our new brands to market have been and will continue to be. But there absolutely is support there, and there absolutely has to be support there. What probably all the panelists here today will tell you is we have to start first and foremost, yes, as Nick says, with a wonderful product, because we have to create a viable business model. Otherwise, every energy that we're putting in, to save these waste materials or to act sustainably, they're for naught if the sort of the business or the brand isn't sustainable of its own right. Being a brand with purpose kind of means the very building blocks of our brand. We need to be conscious where all these elements come from and where we're engaging them and getting them from. So it's something like, for us, discarded the cork that we use in the bottle is specifically utilized. It's specifically created from the 70% of cork that is harvested that never gets used because it's doesn't meet the grade for wine or use in other categories. We create. Are
you able to pass that cost on then? So do you, for example, can you see within your portfolio that you're charging an extra 20p or an extra £1 or £2 compared to the other brands?
So yes, that absolutely has to be taken account of. But the issue comes in when, because we're using such a specialist sort of element over the past 12 months, especially, we know if we can't get something like that, we can't just turn around and pick another cork off the shelf. We can't find that exact same thing elsewhere because we're a brand of purpose. So not only do you have the logistical cost, but then you then have the cost of the interruption of the supply line, and that's a killer for a new business. Fortunately, we get it. Sorry.
Perhaps something there around compromise and non-negotiables. So I think let's kind of grab that and come back to it, because I think there's some good stuff that we can dig into on that shortly. Jeannie, just coming back to you, what is driving cost in your business compared to, say, a mass market producer? Are there any particular processes that you could share with us that are maybe less efficient or just simply cost more because you're doing it in a particular way?
Yeah, certainly for those, I guess for those wines that are, organic farming costs 20% more. We all know that that's a more expensive way to farm. Different paper stock. All of these things can be more difficult to get hold of, can be more expensive. It's both. It's process, and it's also, in our case, it's also manpower. I mean, I've got people working on some of these projects, using man hours and money that I could probably be spending on advertising or on other things. But we've considered that it's important enough for us to do this, and that we need to basically constantly improve.
So whether it be a big business or a slightly more established business, whether it be process or ingredient or material, it's starting to cost a bit more to be purpose-led. And Marika, you've been waiting really patiently for us to come to you. You have an absolutely fascinating business. Tell us a little bit about how you got started, and then we'd love to hear a bit about some of the commercial challenges. You're a very different size to Callum's business.
Thank you. Yeah, so my company indeed is probably the smallest from anybody here. My name is Marika, and my company is called Pachadi Cacao. It is a startup company. and we are based in Amsterdam. We make a juice from cacao pulp, and cacao is, as you can see on the picture here, it's a fruit. Actually, it's like an apple that grows on a tree in tropical countries around the equator. And inside those fruits, there are beans. And the beans we all know because we use them to make chocolate from. So for 500 years, the industry has been set up in such a way where we are importing beans, particularly to the Netherlands, because the Netherlands plays a very important role in the chocolate world for storage and trading and processing beans into chocolate. But everything is set up focusing on the cocoa beans. So that's a bit different than what I do, but a little bit about my background. I think it's also different than most people that I speak to that work in a drink business. They come from the drinks business, and I don't. I come from the cacao world and the chocolate world. I have a background in human rights, and I studied and lived for some time in West Africa. Didn't know anything about cacao. I was there, I was living there, and it was growing everywhere. Cacao and West Africa are very connected to each other, although originally it comes from South America, but most of the beans now grow in West Africa. So it was also where I was growing, and I got involved into this world, and I found it super fascinating that although everybody loves chocolate, we don't really know so much about where it comes from, where the cacao comes from and how it's made and how the supply chain works. Only recently do we get more information about how the supply chain works from companies who make a lot of noise about this. So I was engaged in that chocolate cacao world, and I came back to the Netherlands. I started my own agency. That was in 2014. And I started to work with larger companies and smaller companies on setting up supply chains, working on sustainability, which at the time wasn't a big thing. And in 2017, I was in Ecuador in South America, and I talked to a farmer, and he told me like, hey, have you tried this cacao pulp? And he opened a pod for me right on the spot when I was speaking to him. I was on his farm, and he he kind of changed my perspective, because me too, I was also looking only at the beans and only at chocolates, what we can make from it. And it was like somebody was switching on a light there. And I thought, oh my God, what is this great product that now is just going to waste, because the pulp is like a white layer around the beans that is disappearing when the beans start to ferment and when the pulp starts to ferment. So it just drips into the soil, and that comes to about almost 4 million liters of pulp just draining into the soil. And the flavor of this pulp is incredible. It doesn't taste like chocolate at all, although chocolate's amazing. But it tastes like pineapple and pear and mango and passion fruits. It's super tropical, and it's a bit zesty and astringent and sweet. It's very interesting and layered. So that was for me the start, and that was in 2017. And then I started to set up a supply chain in Ecuador. I started to produce in Ecuador. And that took me a good while to figure out how to do it, how to make a drink. I didn't know I was going to make a drink, but that idea was like, okay, what can I make from this stuff? Well, okay, let's make a drink. And one thing led to the other, just here we are. And in 2020, I launched the drink, the juice that I make, the cacao juice. And it's one of a product portfolio that we're making. So we are constantly developing new products, food and beverage products with the pulp. There's a second product also on the way. So we are keeping ourselves busy and trying to figure out how does it work, because the beverage world is very different than the cacao world. It's much faster. It changes a lot. There's a lot of competition. And we have to keep on moving, like we have to be fast. And we run into all kinds of commercial challenges, figuring out everything like branding and how to communicate our purpose, our purpose is about bringing more value to this amazing fruit that we're only using 20% right now, the beans, and the rest is just wasted, which is crazy. So how can we upcycle that, and how can we increase income of farmers and all these things?
Yeah, amazing. It's a really inspirational story and fascinating as well. Are you finding it to be a cash-intensive business? Because, I appreciate from my own experiences, once you have the concept, but you're then ultimately, this would be a much bigger challenge for yourself. You're then kind of category building almost on something that's a bit different. It can take time to go from product development to really establishing it and getting some solid sales and pull through. How are you, in terms of commercial challenges, are you coping with that okay?
Yeah, coping with it. I wonder if I knew in 2017 how difficult it was going to be, if I would have started it, or maybe I would have done it differently. Probably I would have still started, but yeah,
maybe not,
really, it's not easy. It's not easy. It's like you say, we are not only producing something that didn't exist, that wasn't a product before, and we're producing on the other side of the world. And then bringing that over here, which is also comes with this huge logistic operations, right? That's a challenge, but also commercially to sell the product. And we are in a category, the fresh juice category, that is quite, I don't know how it's in the UK, it's probably a little bit faster, but in the Netherlands, it's orange juice, it's apple juice, it's like, all these
quite
kind
conservative.
of very cheap, also very cheap juices. So we are bringing a new, like a subcategory within a very established low price category, and that's challenging. On the other hand, it also, like, it's challenging to explain to people why our product is more expensive than an orange juice is. It's like, but, and some people say, but it's a waste product, so why is it expensive? And you're like,
yeah. Well, let's definitely come on to that in a little bit. I think, Nick, you already mentioned there's kind of quite a few gatekeepers, and great brand, great purpose. Like, Marika's got this incredible story. She's definitely going to need to charge a little bit more for it compared to the competitors in the Dutch market. Have you got any quick examples of brands that have cut through, that really help that gatekeeper or the outlet, for example, sell the product at a high price?
Yeah, and I mean, there's a couple of things before I touch on that. You asked about the expense of being a brand with purpose. Lots of this accreditation bodies around the world are licensed to print money for certain things, right? They make the rules, they work out what they're charging. And there is a question about independence. So if you want to be a fair trade brand, you're handing over a proportion of your global profits to fair trade, or actually I should say turnover, because it comes before the profit. Organic certification for companies like me to bring in organic products. There are tariffs based on my whole business, because in theory they want to inspect every load at every warehouse and so on and so forth. And none of that's necessarily truly independent. And there's a bit of work being done by, I know, some of the big audit firms in terms of being, a voice of independence. And if those costs can be kept reasonable, then that's okay for brands. But for Marika, it's a really good example. That waste product, it's cheap. It should be much cheaper. Apart from, you have to treat it because it is a waste product. It's not from the original purpose. So, it comes afterwards, and you probably have to do some more work. Orange juice is tanked in like oil tankers and frozen concentrate into the Netherlands, and Marika's certainly not operating on that scale. When you see brands that work very well, and the way they cut through that is to engage. Liquid to lips is a classic example. Samples that are going out there, or activation. Lots of brands with purpose have teamed up with festivals and literally handed out drinks. You see it outside of stations. Things where you can talk to the consumers directly, bypassing those people who say, "Well, this is great, but I've got a multinational over here who, doesn't want you to do that, or will happen to pay more for that slot at exactly the same time," or whatever it is. So you see quite a lot of brands that have done that. I think a classic example of a brand who's done very well and bypassed a lot of the traditions, not necessarily a brand with purpose, although they were talking about flavor ingredients, was Fever Tree. They missed out large sections of the market. They went in, they did that very well directly themselves, and spent an awful lot of money doing it. Having said that, most people can't do that and don't have those budgets. So I do think it's about working with like-minded partners.
I know, like myself, like I feel like one of the things that we learned through lockdown was really, you know, a bit more around how do we acquire new customers? What is our cost of acquisition? Having a bit more of a mature conversation and genuinely learning how to recruit new consumers. And obviously that was, you know, we were looking at that because people had come over to our web shop during lockdown. But, you know, not a surprise to learn again as a business that actually the best and the cheapest way for us to do it is through trial. So liquid on lips, sample, sample, sample. Once people try Hiver, they love it, they're converted, we see really good repurchase rates, but actually until they've tried it, there's a slight nervousness perhaps around sweetness and perceived sweetness. And that is the best and cheapest way for us to tackle that is through sampling activity. So, okay, great. I wonder that it's maybe time for a poll, Aaron, and then I definitely want to chat a little bit about accreditation.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a couple questions for you guys as our audience, so you should all be able to see them. But yeah, I will pull one up, and I think it would be great to get your feedback. Cool. All right.
I saw a couple of people asking, you know, where they could try Jeannie's wine. Is it available in the UK? Same for Callum and obviously for Marika. We will share the links as well, so you'll be able to find out more about the brands and the speakers. And we'll be doing some follow-ups afterwards too, so that will come.
Great, wonderful. Thanks, Hannah. Yep, so just on this, how likely are consumers to purchase a brand with purpose over its competitors? So you can see a few answers coming in, so I'll just give it another second or so. All right, perfectly, great. Right, and so for that one, the answer was they are 4 to 6 times more likely to purchase a brand with purpose over its competitors. Great. Should we do one more, I think, Hannah, and then we'll
do it.
Great, all right. So following the current demand for purpose-driven brands, what percentage of companies today have a clear and defined purpose? So just give it a couple of seconds. Let's see a couple more. All right, give it one more second or so. Great. And the answer for that one was 37%.
Wow. I wonder if we could challenge clear and defined purpose. But,
I'm sure.
Well, you guys would be best. Yeah, you're best placed to challenge that. Actually, you need to be giving the rest of us some tips.
Wonderful.
Okay, lovely. Well, thanks everybody. I feel like we're kind of really digging into some good stuff. We did just touch on, you know, what's going to warrant this price point, how our consumers, you know, are going to choose between one brand and another, and what warrants a higher RRP for a consumer. And Nick just touched on accreditation. So Marika, just to come back to you, I know you've got a couple of real frustrations around this. What are your frustrations around certification?
I have a bit of hate-love thing with certification. In a way, it's good that it's there. It's definitely better than it was before for so many things, for sure. But it's also, like, speaking of certification in the chocolate world, which I know better, like, since big companies are talking about how important they find sustainability and everything, so they are, Nestle and all the big companies are talking, communicating about how important it is for them, the amount of certified cacao is really boosted, like it really has come up. But what most people don't really understand is that it's just highlighting a part of the supply chain that the certification program finds important. It's not a solution to solve poverty or to solve quality or anything like that. It's just part of a solution, basically. And that's the difficulty that I have with certification, is that when people look at it, they think, okay, this is the best one because it's certified. But it's actually only the industry that certifies products. When you go more in the premium, like in the premium chocolate world, for example, most chocolate makers, they don't really care so much because they care more about the direct relationship, that the farmer gets paid the right price, you know, that they try to communicate about it, and marketing, which is also like costly. So they rather spend it on these kind of things than on paying the certifier to come over and do an audit, or to pay the administration costs for organic certification every year, which is quite high. So the investment that is put on the supplier, on the farmer, everybody before, before the consumer picks up the product, is covering or investing in it, and that's not always being returned. So it's just not so easy in a way to do it, and it is very costly, and there's also a lot of bullshitting around it.
We buy tons and tons of raw British honey every year. From some beekeepers, we may buy 1 kilo at a time, and from others, it may literally be a couple of ton at a time. And we regularly get asked, oh, you know, I'm really surprised that Hiver isn't certified organic. Well, yeah, we're buying amazing raw British honey from independent beekeepers. For many of them, they can't afford the accreditation. And in order to do that, their bees would have to be foraging and gathering nectar from an organic crop. So it's actually incredibly complex and you know, not actually possible for many of those beekeepers, because they don't have access to organic crops to be able to set their bees loose and then be able to say, well, actually, I can guarantee that over 80% of what the nectar source that has gone into this honey is from organic. So I think that lack of understanding from consumers and trade as well around what organic certification for Hiver would be in our supply chain is a bit of a frustration. Nick, I know you've got an example of the cost as well from something that you once were importing.
Yeah, we have had and represent brands that are certified organic. Happen to be in South America, and that works for the US. When they came to the EU and therefore the UK, this is obviously pre-January, their certification isn't recognised apparently. So it has to be recertified. As you say, the transparency of it is, I mean, in our case, it's very easy to prove. But that involves quite a lot of costs and fees to be paid, sending some people out to go and look at it. And it actually would have cost us, you know, Mangrove, the importer as a business, it would have cost us more than we would have made out the product in a year just to have it certified organic. Actually arrived with organic accreditation already in its back label because it is, you know, US organic accreditation. So we actually had to pay for relabeling on that product. There is no global consistency. And that goes across a whole heap of things. You know, there's a lot, especially around things like carbon neutrality, where companies will tell you that they're carbon neutral. Lots of this is done through tree planting or, you know, offsetting. And some of the businesses we work do that, but we replant native trees in forests that have been deforested. We don't plant them in forestry plantations in the UK, for example, are going to be cut down in 5 years. So if you're a consumer and you just buy labels and you look at medals and you look at things, it's great, but until you know the small print, it's not actually necessarily worth anything that's there. What it does mean is smaller producers who are doing the right thing, who can't necessarily afford it, get, if you like, pushed to one side by bigger corporations who quite often are self-funding the bodies themselves. And so the accreditation comes that says, yeah, absolutely, you can have this sticker because you've done enough, and it costs you how many hundreds of £1,000s a year, thereby keeping everybody else out. And that's wrong. You know, there needs to be more independent and explanations really for consumers.
So accreditation is kind of, you know, the purpose-led brands are seeking accreditation to help them define themselves from other brands and in the marketplace, and it's very competitive. Consumers find it an easy way of establishing, okay, well, that brand aligns with my values, and actually we know increasingly that consumers want to live their values through the products that they consume. but there's still a bit of miseducation there. Do you think that is driving this trend towards quite activist, an activist tone in cause-led communication for brands? Because I think there's been quite a shift there, which is not just buy this, this is also happens to be great for the planet, but actually really championing a cause, being cause-led and I guess educational.
There's a whole heap of rubbish around lots of things, and the problem for some brands, some people, believe it so, like everything, believe it so passionately, and they will argue till the cows come home that what they do is better than somebody else and how they're doing it and various things. The danger with that is that you turn consumers off, and let's let me be very clear. Corporations doing something better today than they did yesterday is a good thing for all of us, right? And not everybody's perfect, so steps in the right direction, and retrofitting plants that have been around for a couple of hundred years to have wind turbines or whatever else is a big capex and can't necessarily be done overnight. So we don't know what necessarily corporations have in their plans, and we should all be encouraging things that go forward. And sometimes people become overzealous about their own standings, and we've seen some of that. And the problem comes, and it was exacerbated in the pandemic. If you stand there and you argue, and people like, there's a large Scottish brewery that's currently experiencing some PR difficulties through not just the acts of the owners, but some of the things it has or hasn't done. Very difficult from the outside, but it's sort of, in its marketing, it's been having a go at everybody else for not doing it as well as they do, to then find that, So there's always skeletons in closets for various people. And during a pandemic, I work with people who pride themselves on the sourcing of their glass and the weight of their bottle and everything else, but during the pandemic, they weren't available. So they've had to go to a different solution. Callum mentioned it about cork.
Is that maybe a chance for us to nip to a poll, and then maybe we can talk about compromises?
Yeah, great. So I've got another question for you all. So what percentage of consumers have taken an action in response to a brand doing something they disagreed with? Let us know what you think. You can see responses coming in very fast for this one. Great, I'll just give it another second or two. Great. And so for the answer to that one, it is 76%, with actions including no longer buying from the brand, switching to a competitor, or discouraging others from buying or supporting that brand. We'll go with one more, maybe.
Lovely.
What standards do you personally believe drinks brands should have today in order to be classified as purpose-driven? So no correct answer for this one, just to see, I think, what people think would be quite interesting.
I think this is also where it's tricky from a small business perspective as well. For any business, I guess, small or large, there's so many areas, and you're never going to get all of it right, and certainly not on day one. So it is like we talk a lot internally about it being a journey, and that sounds a bit bit worthy, but we're never going to be perfect. We just have to keep taking fairy steps along the way, and making sure that that's not putting the business at risk as well.
For sure. And I think interesting, so we've seen here, I think majority of people have said all of the above, but of course, interesting to see as well, sustainable packaging, value, sourcing ingredients. And maybe perhaps less people think diverse and inclusive culture or renewable energy, but I think for a lot of drinks brands, especially whiskey, renewable energy is a big one. And I think just diverse and inclusive culture. We've got another question about that later. So yeah, interesting to see. Sure. Great, thanks, Anna.
Yeah, pleasure. Well, I guess we were talking a little bit about comms and what, you know, the tone that and the educational tone that we feel that we need to take in order to sort of take consumers on that journey with us as purpose-led brands. And we could definitely talk more about that, especially if our audience have questions on it. But I wonder, this idea of risk and mitigating risk, there's a lot of fear around greenwashing, and consumers are quite happy to kind of call people out that they don't feel are living up to those standards. We just touched on a bit of that as well with Fed Brewery. Jeannie, have you got any compromises that you'd like to share with us? What's your journey been like since starting the vineyard?
Well, I mean, to be honest, you know that. Sorry, is that me? No.
You're back.
I'm back. Good. So yeah, so I think in terms of comms, you know, and actually it's quite pertinent for us to talk about this as well, because, you know, we are also a business that, you know, is on a journey, because we've got some things that, you know, we've worked in certain ways for a long time. You know, the wine industry is very traditional. We've got certain constraints as well that are only just starting to unwind. I mean, a good example is bottle weight. You know, I'm sure we're all familiar with that one, but in wine, you know, it was the equivalent of a quality bottle. So, you know, if you had a light bottle, you had a cheap wine. You know, it was as simple as that. So it's only just in the last year that, you know, we've had, you know, some really encouraging noises that people will actually, you know, consider a lighter bottle or consider the bottle weight not as a quality indicator. So there's a lot of things like that that have just sort of, you know, opened up for people like us. And that we feel with space. And I think so for us personally speaking, you know, we've always been very honest because I think, you know, you try and just say what you do, what you don't do, what you're working on, and then that is, you know, that is your way to kind of, you know, be honest in front of the consumer. And of course there's people who misunderstand, you know, we get that people, you know, they don't read properly what you're writing, you know, these sort of things do happen, but generally speaking, you know, you get people to understand that this is not, you know, you haven't reached your destination. This is a constant, you know, this is a constant process. And I think the other thing that we talked about, you know, I so admire, you know, Marika and others, and obviously Nick Scott, you know, and Callum, you know, these are brands that were founded with these express, you know, social and incredible purposes. But you also, you know, what's quite nice about some of the bigger businesses, I guess, is also the changes that we're making do have quite a lot of impact. You know, it's a little bit like the discussion, you know, veganism versus a lot of people not eating meat on a Monday. You know, niche, you know, that, you know, the niche brands do lead the way, and they give us so much inspiration. I'm very inspired by you all. But on the other hand, I think we have to consider also that if some of the big brands, you know, if someone like Grants or, you know, or Beam, if they, you know, if they change all their paper stock, you know, that's a lot of paper. And so, you know, I think there's always these sort of different levels.
And I guess ideally those over time, we'd like to think that those initiatives perhaps meet in the middle. We're just losing Jeannie a little bit there. So Callum, you're, you know, you're doing something you're very proud of day in, day out, and absolutely hat off to you. Amazing initiatives.
Where people are on their journey and in this ecosystem. And I think, you know, it's a good thing that we're all talking about. No, we are really all.
So Jeannie, we just keep losing you a little bit there, but thank you very much. I was just saying, so Callum, you're doing something that you're very proud of, and brands that you're very proud to drive and sell day in, day out. Do you get much of a backlash, given that you're part of a bigger business, which is Grant & Sons? Do people challenge your credibility as a result?
So the backlash, there hasn't been so much of a backlash yet, but certainly it's always a watch out for us. We know that because we're leading this for William Grant & Sons, it gives us great voice internally. as well as externally. So, you know, so like when we challenge maybe other brands on their sustainability credentials, or maybe you know, so like our packaging or whatever, you know, so like if we go and go, do you really need to be doing things like that? We have a certain level of backing internally, which is very, very important. Certainly, we know that when somebody does it incorrectly, and it will inevitably happen, but when somebody does it incorrectly, we know we'll kind of take the hit on that first, not necessarily the brand as a whole. I think we'll definitely get a call out, and that is a watch out. But there's, you know, so there's only so many things you can do to mitigate that. People do make missteps in this journey. You know, and you know, it is a little bit cheesy, but it is a journey. Our packaging was not perfect on day one. We are getting better. We repackaged last year to be more sustainable, to use more recycled glass, to you know, make the bottle 100% recyclable, which is still remarkably rare. And that's something that we can now pass on to sort of those internal stakeholders and go, right, we've done it. Now let's see your other brands do it. But yeah, things like even things on a larger scale, like how we distribute and how we get samples internally. You know, these are things that we're still working on, and we're still pushing on. We're getting better.
Yeah, brilliant. And I guess ideally, like if you're transparent and open about this is what we do well, and this is where we need, you know, this is where we know we're a bit weaker, but you know, like you want that engagement with the consumer, don't you? You need them to be part of that journey, because actually, I think what's difficult is there are things that, you know, I know are really important about our supply chain that genuinely have good environmental impact. But actually, if somebody's web box arrives with some plastic sellotape on it, the perception to the consumer is much more negative than, and it's hard. It goes back to that comms idea of being able to say, well, having the budget to, you know, educate somebody about the ins and outs of your supply chain and your CO2 metric. That's something that as a business we're now trying to build in, but it's costly both from a, you know, cash and resource and time perspective for a small business. So you can't always get it right, and sometimes I think the consumer doesn't always get it right either. Marika, how have you built credibility into your brand, especially given the amount of education that you guys have to do?
Well, for us, I hear an echo. Is it still there?
You're back.
Okay, I'm back on. I don't know. For us, it's yeah, of course, the purpose is the heart of what we do. It is, you know, we constantly thinking about how can we put the farmer in the heart. You know, how can we tell their story? How can we tell the story about cacao and about the supply chain? And we constantly are doing that. Not so much with the idea we want to tell the purpose of the brand, because it's so much in our DNA that we constantly doing that anyway. But it's also indeed like what you say, education, like what is this fruit? You know, what does it do? Why is it good for you? There's so much communication about that going on as well. It's definitely not only about purpose, because it's natural. It's like, you know, you don't, yeah, if it's your character, then you don't have to talk about that the whole time, right? So, yeah. I mean,
I guess you come at it as a bit of an industry knowledge, you know, an industry leader as well, don't you? You've got that background of human rights as well. So yeah. I'm sure that you also give your business and brand great credibility. Is there pressure being like the face of the business? Do you feel it's all on you?
I don't know. No, not.
Oh, you're still at that stage where you're really enjoying it.
It's okay, but it's true. I think it does give credibility. I'm quite vocal in the industry about certain things. So I for example, I write blogs about, you know, what it's like to have a startup, and this blog goes to like big industry guys, you know, who read this as well. So it's super scary. It's very vulnerable, where I'm talking about all these like little problems that startups are facing, right? Okay, I need to get funding, I need to do this, I need to do that, and like, but I think that also helps with the credibility, and that people are following our journey, also the big corporates, to see how these guys there are doing it. Sure. And perhaps, yeah, it does give credibility, I think, but it's not enough to build a brand, right? It's just an extra, maybe.
Lovely.
Yeah,
I
the
think
product
that confidence
good.
also really stems from the knowledge as well, and I think that's probably something that all of the speakers have in common. Like, just its passion for a particular topic or an ingredient, and then you know, the reward that you get, not just when you see your own business grow or your brand grow, but actually consumers enjoying it and buying into it. You know, that is ultimately incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
Any non-negotiables that anybody, you know, like I know for me the last couple of years especially, it's been a challenge, and you sometimes feel that there are compromises that you have to make, but it helps you shape your ultimate, yeah, it helps you shape what your non-negotiables are, I think. Has anybody got anything to share on that?
Yeah, I can share something about that. So, I mean, the product is new, and that in a way is a good thing, because it's new and it's innovative and it is sustainably produced and it's exciting, and that helps us as a company to knock on doors of retailers and of companies, and everybody wants to separate themselves from the other, right? So we give them a reason in a way to have something on their shelves or on their menu that is different than what most others are doing. So that really is very helpful. But sometimes negotiations can also get tough. And when, you know, for me, this is all really like a learning curve and journey to figure that out. But once I was talking to a retail company and that has several branches in the Netherlands, and it was a very uncomfortable conversation. He was like really pushing on price, like he wanted to get it for cost price, and also he wanted me, because it's such a new product, he said to me like, okay, you have to give us 1,000 free bottles to for sampling in the stores. And I was thinking like, what? This is normal, right? So I'm also talking to a few people like, is this normal? Yeah, no, I don't know, maybe for a new company, a new product like yours, maybe like. But it, like, in the end, it didn't feel good. Like this conversation and how he was pushing on price, cost price, and needs to be cheap, cheap, cheap. And you are the new kid on the block, so you have to persuade us, and you have to come with your free products and everything. It didn't feel good, and I said nope, and I stepped away. And I have one competitor who has the same product as me, but then from a different part of the world, and they eventually picked that product and put it on the shelves. And I was like, okay, you know, so for that was for me a non-negotiable. Like, I don't want to work with those kind of people, and I don't want the products to be sold as a very cheap product, because it's not. It is an expensive product because it is a great value. So that for me was non-negotiable.
Yeah, it's a lovely idea, like the promotion of value in a product which is above its price point. It's really interesting. Yeah. You could do a whole hour chat on that alone. Is it time for another poll, I wonder?
Think so. Let's go for it. Great. So, in what country are people most likely to support a brand earning a profit if they have also had a positive impact on the world? So we've got Japan, USA, China, or India.
Do you do much travel with your work, Callum, as Banana Peel Rum?
I get to travel up and down the UK. I'm very much UK based. It's funny that you're talking about in the discussions of non-negotiables and where sort of where that line is. So we offset all our carbon through all our travel that we pick up anyway, just through our internal systems. I travel by train absolutely as much as possible. I haven't taken a flight in quite some time for work, which I'm very pleased about. So I get all up and down the country. However, I think it's going to be interesting for our brand as a whole. We are sort of predominantly UK based at the moment. We are expanding into certain territories in Europe at the moment, but because we are, sort of our vermouth is based on a byproduct from the Scottish whisky industry. Our rum is based on byproduct from the Scottish whisky industry. Our vodka, we've kind of added a little bit of future proofing into with the suppliers we work with, in terms of if we want to take this to sort of America or Australia, we can make that product there, so that we're not creating something here and calling it sustainable and taking it abroad and adding all those air miles and things like that. So we're conscious that we're going to have these logistical challenges going forward, and how we address them without sort of passing over these lines that we've sort of set ourselves.
I think there's something nice in building in personal habits as well, because if there are some rules and restrictions there around travel, it's like all of us as individuals and consumers as well, we can all do a bit more and be a bit better, right? So nice, it's lovely.
Right, thanks. Great. So we've got majority, I think, thinking it's Japan and most USA after that, but it is actually India at 98% of people, which is very high. 98% say they would support a brand earning a profit if they also had a positive impact on the world. So quite a big one now.
Amazing.
Great.
Oh, guys, we're all in the wrong marketplace. That's going to be one of the takeaways from today. We need to jump ship.
I actually, in a point to that, just to a certain extent, brands that are making a big positive difference in, some of the more deprived parts of the world, or parts of the world, you can almost guarantee that any coastal community is fully on board with brands being planet positive, regardless of how much money they make, because without it, they'll have no livelihood and no home. And so, this whole situation is evolving very, very fast for all brands. And it's not necessarily about us all having to do our part and thinking that's like a negative thing, having a purpose. But there are great opportunities for brands who can do that as well and gain some areas. There is success to be had, however you want to measure that. And it may be in some other regions. The world is a small place when it comes to communication, for sure.
I wonder, just in maybe trying to wrap up a bit of what we've spoken about then, I get a sense, if and feel free to challenge me on this, both speakers and audience. So we're kind of saying that regardless of size of business, whether it be startup or more established, whether somebody's had purpose at the start of their journey or brought it in more latterly, that there are definitely commercial challenges and hurdles to succeeding in that space. And that actually covers a spectrum of areas. So communication, supply chain, maybe startup funding, right through to risk of greenwashing and like education, certification, cost of product being more expensive, all that kind of stuff. But we haven't really touched on, I guess in wrapping up, does purpose sell? Do you all think that, yes, your business is selling more because of its purpose led ethos? It's making a higher margin because of that, and it is more successful as a result. It might not be yes to all three, but maybe we can just quickly say, each of us, does purpose sell? Callum, shall I start with you?
Yeah, I think it's reflective, not in the fact that, and not just in the fact that we're all here today to talk about this, and we have 60 odd people watching us. Purpose is massively important to we're all consumers, really, so all of us, we're all trying to make a positive impact. The fact that we're getting on shelf and on menu and these sorts of things is indicative that we've got a great business model now. Is the purpose as part of that business model? Inherently, yes, but it's maybe not sort of the only reason. So a better reflection maybe is, as Nick said earlier, look at the other brands, the established brands that are already there, that are now retrofitting this sustainability or purpose-driven element to their brands, and there's plenty of them. You can we could all sort of name 4 or 5 right now, but these brands, they're not silly. They're clearly doing this for a reason. They're not immediately going, yeah, we're super sustainable because, so they've always been super sustainable. If they had, then they would have been discussing it. So I think that is your reflection on the fact that this is something that is selling and is important to being on shelf and getting your liquid or your product into people's hands.
Jeannie, does purpose sell for you?
Yeah, well, listen, it's sometimes you have to take some time to actually explain it. I think it's not always a sort of, you're not just going to instantly have a great success just because you talk about purpose. So I think you have to weave it into your communications. You have to weave it into your products. But we as a business believe in it. And we think it's going to be a little bit of in a way, a threshold that, people are just going to consider it normal that people like us take care of what we can take care of and constantly stretch ourselves. And I think unless you're going in that direction, I think you're going to be before long out of the conversation. So I think it's going to be one of those things that, take a good look and do what you can as soon as possible.
Marika, does purpose sell for you?
In itself, it doesn't sell, but it has to be part of a great product. Like everything has combined has to really make sense. It has to be truthful, authentic, and unique, and everything. And the purpose is a very important part. And in a way, it helps. Like I know that when people hear the purpose and they hear the story, they are more eager to buy it, and they're also more they don't mind that it's a higher price than orange juice. So in that sense, it helps. It also helps our customers, B2B companies, to tell what they find important to their customers. So if they have us on a menu, then basically they're saying, okay, we embrace new products, we embrace startups and local entrepreneurs, and we embrace sustainability. So for them, it also helps to sell. And it also, I think, purpose helps to engage with an audience who has a similar kind of purpose. So everybody clicks on different kinds of topics, right? We cannot, I don't have that same thing for bees as you have, but maybe, some people have this for cacao and chocolate, and they connect to my story in a different way than they would to the bee. So I think it's definitely very, very important part, and it definitely helps us to get a foot in the door, to tell the story why we find it important. And it also helps me as a founder to stay connected to where I want to go and not be distracted too much, although that's not always easy. So it definitely plays a very important role in Pachadi Cacao. Yeah, for sure.
I think from my own personal experiences with Hiver, there's something I can definitely, Callum's point and Marika's around winning listings and it being your point of differentiation, something that Nick mentioned. During lockdown, our revenues at Hiver dropped to 12% almost, overnight, which I'm sure everybody's got similar sort of experiences. And what was incredible was, it was that loyalist fan base that actually, through the support of buying beer online through our website, we got it back up to about 35–40% within a few months, despite the traditional channels of the business not being open. And as we started then going, well, hang on a minute, like I really need to start talking a bit more to this loyalist customer base. We've got this fantastic newsletter that we send out every week. 20,000 people receive it. They've chosen to sign up to it and remain engaged by it. We need to chat to them a little bit more about what is it even that they like about the beer and about Hiver. I didn't even know. And it was amazing because for many of them, it was just a real sense of support. Like, love that beer. It's my favorite beer. We absolutely love what you do for the planet. And I'm really behind that. And I feel that buying your products really, it enables me to do my little bit, and it encourages me to do my bit as well. So what was interesting for me, I think, was just really for the first time, tangibly connecting our purpose to our loyalist fan base, who, obviously responsible for a good chunk of our revenues and the health of the business. So I think, that it becomes more and more integral, I think, as you go as well. And I know what you mean about keeping it something that keeps you focused. Nick, does purpose sell for you?
God, I hope so. That's how I make my living. But unlike the other people here, I'm living off the back of people who've created great brands with purpose. I think it's a really important tool in the kit, right, of everything that goes together. So I think if you go back to, you start with a great quality product, and that has this purpose, then that might be a differentiator. I would say three other things. We've seen, and we've all spoken about the movement over time of more brands with purpose, or the purpose becoming more important to consumers, and so on and so forth. But certainly we saw that during the pandemic accelerate beyond all forecasts, and I think that trend will continue. So there is a question that says, you know, do we have to have a purpose as a brand now? Well, we're probably going to need to have one in a very short period of time, because consumers are going to be asking, hang on a minute, you know, what are you doing? You see this with
a bit like Jeannie said, it's just the new normal and expected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And actually, I think it will be worse than that. I think if you look at big multinational corporations at the moment, and this is good news for some brands coming here as well, they are scrabbling to make their environmental footprint better, their corporate social responsibility quotient. You know, I would say from some of their perspective, it's a box ticking exercise, one that we should applaud because they are making genuine steps. But there's also a lot of people thinking, well, I can't do it in my own business, and you have to decide morally how you find this. So I'll invest in businesses and I'll support businesses that can offset what I do. And so for some of our brands that have a purpose, there will be unexpected, you know, Marika, because she had an idea and a purpose, she's come up with a great product. So it also generates NPD, but you might find that some people come along and want to fund something else. I think one of the big challenges is, and I hope it will go away, we've been working with a very large national chain of bars for quite some months. The CEO is supportive, the people at outlet level are incredibly supportive. This is all about reducing carbon footprint. But when push has come to shove, they've got a purchaser who is remunerated on saving the business money. And they've gone down a different route back to some brands they know very well, where the revenue will be probably, or at least offers a potential for more. Their ongoing cost base initially starts out less. And so their whole approach to carbon footprint reduction seems to have disappeared. So, you know, you've got one hand doing one thing and another doing another. So I think what will happen is consumers will change that. And that's the good news for everybody here and brands going forward, is that there is a generation of consumers coming along and saying, hang on, where does your materials come from? Where does this, you know, what do you do with your waste? What is the energy? What are you chucking in the rivers? What are you chucking in the ocean? The most obvious that is plastic and plastic reduction, and you've seen some good stuff from from large and small companies, and that will continue. And so for everybody out there, you know, banging the drum, feeling it's quite a lonely battle, it's coming. Retailers are jumping on board. There's some really exciting stuff coming from some of the retailers about it.
Absolutely.
And so there's lots of reasons to be positive.
I think while there's still, like, you do a lot of learning as a business with purpose, I think, about what works, what's connecting with your consumer, what's not, how you can warrant a higher RRP. So you're never going to get it all right on day one. But I do think that really brilliant idea of that we touched on earlier, of it really helps you build in extra value to your business that is not just about additional cash margin, but rather loyalty and a sense of, like, you know, this is a, you know, this Pachadi Cacao, it's a product that has high value, it's very precious, and I do think there's something in that actually that we could maybe dig into another time, like, you know, these beautiful natural ingredients that we all work with, we tell the story of them through our products. They are precious, they're precious resources, and so how fantastic if we're both juggling making that work commercially and introducing people to it. And it feels good as well, right? Doesn't it? It feels good. Lovely. Well, I think that's everything from me. Thank you to all the speakers. I've really genuinely enjoyed this talk. Thank you very much to WonderWorks for making it happen, for Aaron for pulling it all together and getting us here today. Thank you, audience, for your fab questions. We'll get links out and follow-up information to you. And I'll really look forward to the WonderWorks insights piece as well. Like, very much looking forward to having a read of that. It's been very inspiring. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for a lovely session.
Yeah, great to see you. And I've just posted a couple of links to our panelists' websites in chat. But as Hannah mentioned, we'll also follow up with a quick email as well. And the webinar will also be recorded, which we can share with you too, in case you want to share with any friends or colleagues who missed it. So, but yes, big thank you to our audience and to our panelists, and for everyone joining us on a Tuesday and giving up their lunchtime. So it's been a real pleasure, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Thanks so much for coordinating this.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Lovely.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you. Okay.